So here's the map. So that's the map of Syria, and that is the most recent update when it comes to the map of Syria. Mind you, things are changing very rapidly when it comes to the map, and every minute we have new updates on the ground when it comes to the Syrian map. So here are the areas that are now under the armed opposition control. Don't forget, we started off in this area in the Idlib province. Now we have all of these areas under the opposition control, including Homs. Homs has been completely now under the control of the armed Syrian opposition, and we are heading towards Damascus too. But significant things to understand here are what's happening on the borders here. If you look, there have been more controls here, more control coming from the areas. Yeah, this would work. That are traditionally under some of the Kurdish movements. So we're getting closer to Deir ez-Zor and some of these villages that are here. And the Kurdish movements here, Qas, they're called Syrian Democratic Forces. They're backed officially by the United States. And this was the border that the 1,500 Assad forces fled from to Iraq. All of this is now under opposition control. How did they all of a sudden control all of these areas, including Al-Suwaida? Suwaida, you're talking about minorities in Syria, and Dar'a and Sanamain, all of these areas up to the... Now we're talking about it's potentially going to be hours, if maximum maybe days up until they get hold of Damascus. There has been a publication about a control, right, an operations room of the south. So previously we were talking about the opposition coming from the north to the south up to Damascus, but now Damascus is being now the armed groups are coming to Damascus from the south. This was a massive surprise, and in these areas there were individual uprisings in some of them that fell under the umbrella of the armed opposition, including from ethnic minorities inside of Syria. That these areas are very well known for. But before we get into Damascus, here is one of the most significant things that happened. What are they? The fact that they are controlling all of the borders with Israel. They are controlling all of the borders with Israel, the armed opposition groups, right? And this is causing friction between them and Israel. Israel is now deploying forces throughout all of the Golan Heights. And what are they doing? They are, which are occupied Golan Heights because they are Syrian. However, Syria did not, this Assad government did not do anything to get the Golan Heights back. I mean, and there were many reports about a deal being brokered between them and Israel to not do anything. And previous reports that Iraq were willing to help them recapture the Golan Heights, and they did not do that. Unlike when it comes to Egypt, who liberated Sinai, the Sinai Peninsula following the 1973 war on the 6th of October. What is Israel doing here? They are deploying forces. Israel is deploying forces all, of course, the Golan Heights, and they are having military drills, and they are sending warnings to the armed opposition groups over there. And I wanted to share with you a report coming from Israel confirming these threats and also confirming who is Israel trying to deal with inside of Syria. So there were a couple of reports here about the bear with me 1 second so I can share this clearly with you. Here we go. So dialogue between the Kurds in Israel. Israel always tries to capitalize on the Kurdish thing, by the way. And a threat to the rebels. The Kurdish stronghold, they contacted Israeli officials. According to this report, Israel sent a message to the rebels in southern Syria that the IDF would act forcefully if they dared to cross the border. Not only that, but there was another report saying what? Saying that Israel actually conducted an attack. They attacked the rebels in what they labeled as a very unusual move, an unusual incident where the IDF intervened and did what? Syrian rebels, according to Israel, again, their excuse, Israel's excuse, that rebels attacked a UN post in the buffer zone that was agreed upon between the Assad government in 1974 and Israel. So they're claiming that the rebel forces attacked it, and they went to protect the UN. Oh, how generous is that? People massacring infants in Gaza and targeting UN posts and destroying UNRWA schools, saying that we want to protect the UN. An IDF spokesman updated on the incident in the area of the village of Khadar near Majd al-Shams. An attack by armed men was detected, and the IDF assisted the UN force. This is the excuse, okay? But what we can clearly understand that something happened there. Explosions were heard in the Golan, firing by our forces, according to them. In the shadow of the developments in Syria, the army emphasized the deployed forces are reinforced at the front. This is the main reason for the military intervention. And again, they are saying that we tried to protect a UN post. Was it a rebel attack or a limited invasion to areas that they don't necessarily recognize with Israel? Because, we're talking about it's a new reality soon. Or is Israel trying to test the borders with them? Are they trying to test the borders? Because now, like the map shows, they are controlling all of the borders with the occupying entity over here. All of that is opposition inside of Syria. But let's go back to that article that I was talking to you about when it comes to some of the Kurdish movements. So they said Israel sent a message to the rebels in southern Syria that the IDF will act forcefully if they dare to cross the Israel-Syria border or the 1974 line. This means that a direct channel has been opened between Israel and opponents of Bashar Assad's regime, who are the Kurdish movements. Saturday News Khan Evening said that there were initial talks between the Kurds in Syria and official representatives inside of Israel. So, and they're quoting here, Foreign Minister Gideon Saar said that Israel is seeking to form an alliance with minorities in Syria and Iraq, including the Kurds. However, it might be too late for that if they're trying to do that. Why? Because now you're talking about a rapid expansion of the opposition armed forces across of Syria and almost controlling Damascus. And then some of the Kurdish-controlled movements. And now, mind you, another thing here, the Democratic Syrian forces, they are fully backed by the United States. And there have been reports, well, Donald Trump is saying we don't have nothing to do with Syria now, we shouldn't have anything to do with Syria. There are reports that the United States is going to lift the support, and that will leave them with the Syrians. But the reconciliatory tone coming from the armed opposition is also open to the Kurdish movements in East Syria. And again, there were some indications that they would be willing to have a one Syrian state where there's, coexistence and liberty. And mind you, again, you might be talking about a one state with small, federal states, right, or small states that have a level of autonomy, which is an example that we have in many other countries, but albeit in one border. Okay, I know all of that might be a lot to kind of sink in, and there's a lot more to talk about, by the way. But the key question is why did the Iranians and Hezbollah take the position of, this position with Bashar al-Assad? There are many arguments to that. Firstly, for people to understand the relationship between Iran and Syria, it goes back for a very long time. Syria helped Iran in a limited manner when it comes to their war with Iraq in the 80s. And they also viewed Syria as a strategic connection between them and Lebanon. And Lebanon and Iran, they have historical ties, by the way, when it comes to their scholars, communities, people, and what have you. Neither Iran nor Hezbollah agree with the way the Syrian government used to work, like, one party, and you're talking about a religious interpretation, within Islam when it comes to Iran and Hezbollah. And they had their differences with the Assad government. There were differences previously between the Iranians and the Assad government, and there were previous differences between Hezbollah and Assad. And there have been conflicts, bloody conflicts between Hezbollah and Assad forces back in the 80s. And many of them have been clarified by or spoken about by one of the previous secretary generals of Hezbollah, who not many people talk about, Subh al-Tufaili, who heavily criticized Hezbollah for their participation against the Syrian revolution at the beginning of 2011. He had another speech recently as well, where he advised the people, the Hezbollah members, not to have any participation and apologize and have some sort of a reconciliation when it comes to Syria, because we're talking about a new phase and we're talking about a new reality. And he posted a video. It was, of course, in Arabic, and I'm not going to translate all of it. But during that video, he mentioned that we want what's good for the Syrian people. We shouldn't have ever participated in Syria before. And I think Hezbollah should make the right decision now by, confirming that we'll apologize for the past, for what you have done in Syria in particular. Let's all focus on building Syria and building unity, having a state for everyone that works for, and also works for the resistance as well. Now, they've had these differences before, but they could have their interests being implemented inside of Syria with Bashar al-Assad. But there were many assassinations inside of Syria. Many assassinations of figures from Hezbollah and figures from the IRGC. Hezbollah lost Imad Mughniyi in around 2008. The IRGC constantly suffers losses, and there were suspicions before that, someone is saying something from within, because we're not talking about one occurrence. We're talking about something that has been repeated time after time, despite the interests being met when it comes to, for example, the channeling of weapons or officials or advisors to Hezbollah, and having offices of some of the resistance movements inside them. Because again, that doesn't really say that the actual government itself is a resistance government. Like the Hamas offices, officially still are in Qatar. You can't call Qatar a resistance country, but Hamas offices are there. Like Taliban had offices there when they were talking with the Americans about a peace process in Afghanistan. Did they see something from the Assad government or from Assad directly that they did not like? We were talking yesterday and the day before about proposals or observations coming from Israeli journalists and Lieutenant Colonel who's resigned, Amit Yagur, yesterday, saying that we might have to help Assad because we prefer an enemy we know over an enemy we don't know. But now they have no chance to do anything for Assad, by the way, because there's a rapid expansion. It's like they have no... it's almost unstoppable what's been happening clearly. And again, that was confirmed by the Hezbollah report previously, that the expansion coming from the armed opposition has been dramatic and very well prepared for. It has been a very significant and very calculated campaign. They're admitting it's a campaign. It's called the Turns of Aggression, and that they prepared for it for over a year, for them to control so much territory when it comes to Syria so quickly, starting off at Idlib and all of a sudden Hama, Homs, now south of Homs, close to the Lebanese borders, and then going all down, going up to Damascus from the southern parts. There were, proposals from Israel, or thoughts that we might have to support Bashar al-Assad. And senior figures in Israel, we might have to support it because we don't know these people. We don't know these people who are coming. Again, unlike the narrative of some people who talk about the Syrian situation, that you're talking about only CIA-backed operatives and what have you. So there was another report in Bloomberg that said that actually Assad now is proposing to deal with the US, is making overtures to the US. Says he's open to a deal. What's that deal? To cut the ties with Iran. Well, Iran could have clocked onto it before you. Iran could have clocked on to that fact before Assad made that proposal, or could have seen things going there, and therefore they did not provide the support. Otherwise, how can you explain that there was no participation all of a sudden from Iran, and the change of tone when it comes to Hezbollah, and the lack of support from Iraq and Russia? What is Russia saying, by the way? Have you heard Lavrov? Sergei Lavrov, he had a long statement in which, and he had meetings with Turkey as well, where he was talking about the developments in the region. What did he say? He said, we are looking for an implementation of international resolutions and seeking to stop the bloodshed in Syria. As if nothing happened. Sergei Lavrov. We fought in Afghanistan and then we dealt with the Taliban. Why would Lavrov say that? Lavrov is preparing the ground to deal with the new Syrian opposition. We had blows with Taliban before, and then we dealt with Taliban. What does that tell you? That tells you that you're looking at a new reality, a reality that came as a shock, has been imposed, took everyone by surprise, gave the reassurances that are needed primarily for the Syrian people, or the majority of the Syrian people, or they say saying to all of the Syrian people, but you will still have people, of course, not supporting them. And then to the international key players when it comes to Syria, primarily the sides that they knew participated before to help the Assad government in the form of, well, Russia and Iran and Hezbollah and some of the Iraqis, but Iran basically, because Iran calls the shots. So what are we left with? Well, we're left with more questions to be asked in the future. Firstly, when is this going to end? There have been reports about Assad fleeing. There have been official confirmations or denial that he has. There was a denial also from the Minister of Defense in Syria saying, don't believe anything you see, it's all propaganda, although we're seeing all of the videos of control inside Homs, inside Halab, in the south. So, I mean, I'm not sure what propaganda he's relating to. And one of the worst things were one of the interviews that one of Bashar al-Assad's main key figures in the army having an interview yesterday while he was drunk. And he was being asked about the situation and what's happening. And he clearly, man, was intoxicated, saying, in the morning, I look at the sun and I see Bashar, and in the night, there comes the moon and I see Bashar. I'm not sure how effective that would be when it comes to the effectiveness of the armed forces that are loyal to Bashar fighting on the ground with this rapid expansion that's happening. Damascus is the last bit. Even if the opposition controls Damascus tonight or tomorrow, there's still going to be a lot of things to be done. Unless that is, agreements have been reached, and clearly the armed opposition has had some sort of understandings with key elements inside of Syria, from the Syrian people to many in the Syrian army. That's why we had so many defecting and so many putting their arms down, putting their weapons down, and just wearing their civilian clothing, and many of them fleeing. Some people are expecting the battle when it comes to Damascus to be significant. However, from the coming reports from Damascus, the armed forces of that are loyal to al-Assad, they are leaving their positions. So it's clearly not stopping. After that, we would be looking at, well, the other locations, the coast, Tartus, and then the Kurdish controlled areas inside of Syria, and whether they will reach an agreement with them or not, and many things that will happen in the coming days that we'll hopefully continue and cover.